Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, we've got a real treat. Mr. Brendan Kane is in the house. Brendan has helped the largest brands and celebrities in the world reverse engineer how to make content go viral. Brendan and his team at Hookpoint have generated 60 billion views and 100 plus million followers for the content they've worked on. Over the course of his career, Brendan has developed the first ever influencer campaign on YouTube back in 2007. He's oversaw 200 million in marketing spend. He's worked with major corporations such as MTV, Paramount Pictures, IKEA, and Skechers. He's generated 1 billion in revenue for clients and worked with the names of Taylor Swift and Rihanna, to name a few. He's generated over 1 million followers on his personal Facebook and Instagram account. And that is where I found you, Brendan. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect and have this conversation. And thanks for everybody for tuning in.
It's my pleasure. As I've said before we started recording, I've seen you all over my newsfeed. And I start to pay attention because someone who's got a long history in marketing and business, I like to know how and why. How is this person so visible and so active? And so I'm really excited for a conversation today. But the first question I like to ask is, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I kind of stumbled into social media. I've been in social media since the earliest stages. I started in 2005. So when kind of Friendster and MySpace were still in the scene, and MySpace was the predominant player. But I started in the film industry. I went to film school, wanted to be a film producer. Quickly realized when I showed up in film school, they teach you very little about business there. So I figured the best way to really learn about business, if they weren't teaching you the fundamentals in school, is to start your own. And the most cost-efficient way at the time was creating online companies. So I started a few online companies while I was going to college, really just to kind of learn and experiment. And then when I moved to Los Angeles in 2005 to pursue a career in film, like everybody else, I started at the bottom. I was making coffee, copies, deliveries. And when people would ask me why I moved to LA, specifically the people I wanted to connect with, like the studio executives and directors and producers, I would tell them I wanted to be a film producer, and I could just see their eyes glaze over because it wasn't really a differentiator. It wasn't a strong hook point. So I took a step back and kind of analyzed the situation and tried to figure out what would be my way to kind of stand out and be able to forge the connections at that higher level. And I just noticed when I was working for the first studio, movie studio, we would spend tens of millions of dollars on a film, and there would be a sense of anxiety and stress that would come over the office when that film was done, because you're investing all this money into a single piece of content. But also, you need to effectively let hundreds of millions of people around the world know about this single piece of content in a matter of months. You didn't have years or decades to kind of build a brand around this new original IP. So I just went back to those the heads of the studio and said, I know we're spending money in TV, print, those regular radio, those regular outlets. I can help us tap into these online audiences for a fraction of the cost, in some cases, no cost at all. So kind of that foray allowed me to kind of jump from making coffee and copies to creating digital divisions for studios. And that's where I really started to kind of dig in deeper into social media as it was still in its infancy stages.
What year was it when you brought that to the table to those executives?
It's a great question. I think probably started in like 2006. So probably towards the end of my first year, because I think I spent the first year of trying to figure out how I would break through from a producing element, and then kind of shifted gears to kind of strategize other ways that I could provide value.
So if I go back in time, I think I was in college, 2004, maybe late 2003, when I signed up for my first Facebook account. And I have to imagine, and being too young to know how big Facebook was at that time, we were really only maybe 2 years into Facebook. And I'm guessing at around that time, Facebook business pages had only been out for maybe a year. What was the response like from those executives when you started talking about online marketing, which digital marketing wasn't even really a term, was it?
Yeah, they were open to it because I was on the studio I was working for was kind of like a mini studio where they would still leverage the big like Paramounts and Sony's to distribute their movies. So they were kind of more on the producing side of it. And they were very open and receptive because oftentimes they were thinking about how to market this film before the studios would, because they have a lot I mean, the studios have a lot at stake, but they almost had more at stake in some ways because they invested all this time, energy, money, and resources into producing this piece of content and wanted to ensure that it gave it the best chance of success. So they were very open and receptive to it. They didn't really kind of understand it at the time. I remember the founder of the company said, "Brendan, I have no idea what I'm paying you for, but just do cool stuff and make sure our films are successful, and I'm happy." Um, so in that sense, they were very open and receptive. I think that the challenge I ran into is we were strategizing and planning very early on, and then when we would go into the meetings with the distributors like the Sonys and Paramounts of the world, that's kind of where we hit some resistance a little bit because you have these people with years or decades of experience, and then you have some young kid coming in and trying to kind of reshape the strategy or bringing ideas to the table. And that's ultimately why I left the film industry. It just kind of felt like another corporation, and there was less kind of innovation and ability to try and test new things than I really had hoped for.
Is it fair to say that at that time, after you had done this marketing work with these movies, that the light bulb went off and you said, "Yeah, I see an opportunity to really go deep into this arena"?
Yes, definitely. I don't think I could ever predict that it would be as big as it is today. I didn't really kind of look at the long-term vision of it, but I did definitely see an opportunity there that was underutilized and underfocused. For example, while I was working for the first studio, MySpace got acquired by Fox, and it was like $600 million. And I was like trying to understand like how is Fox going to recoup that acquisition investment. And I just saw that all of their revenue at the time was generated off of banner ads, and it's
Mhm.
low bottom basement CPMs, and the numbers just didn't add up to me. And while I was working for the studio, I actually got the president of the studio to give me money to uh, create a prototype of what was the first influencer kind of technology platform. It was on top of MySpace, and what I saw was people are putting their favorite movie trailers, Nike posters, Prada images, like the products that they connected with, because MySpace, remember, was like a
Yeah.
very expression tool. And it just kind of baffled me that that was the most valuable form of advertising, yet MySpace wasn't capitalizing off of it. So we created a technology whereby you could take these assets, put it on your profile, and each time one of your friends engaged with it, you would ultimately get a cut of the revenue or on a specific KPI. And the vision was to have MySpace share in that revenue. Um, Unfortunately, at the time, this was like probably 2007-ish. It was too early because there wasn't
Yeah.
at that time there was no such thing as an influencer. So there was people
No.
building audiences, but it wasn't like it is today. So it was just too early. There wasn't enough volume there. The data that we were collecting off the tests was um, very engaging or very promising in terms of outperforming other standard forms of advertising, but the scale wasn't really there for the ultimate kind of vision of what it could be.
It's amazing how things have evolved. I recall when I worked for a company that manufactured cellular accessories. Probably back in 2012, we did what's called a blogger outreach campaign, which was probably the next phase of what you're talking about. But it's funny how times have changed. I want to switch gears a little bit. You had mentioned when you were talking about the movie industry, you said hook point, and I know that's what your agency's called. I want to know more about what hook point means because I think it's going to be very important in this conversation and potentially very valuable to a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, so the core ethos of Hook Point and just everything that we do as a company, and the term is like, how do you rise above the noise? How do you stand out, differentiate yourself? So the term hook has been around for 100 years. It's like the hook is a big term in copywriting. And kind of when I looked at the course of my career and how I stood out, and then all the work that our team does, I wanted to kind of reframe that conversation and that term. And I look at a hook point as three core pillars: is how do you grab attention? Because if you don't grab attention in today's world, you really kind of get left by the wayside. You need to grab attention in order to get to the second core pillar, which is holding attention, because attention has no substance if you can't really hold it. So this isn't about clickbait or tricking people. It's about grabbing their attention, telling a compelling story that matches the hook and holds that attention long enough that goes into the third core pillar, which is monetizing that attention. Because, like, if we're talking about prank videos or silly cat videos or content that's not related to your brand, it doesn't really translate into your overall business objectives and goals. So again, the way I see a hook point is, how do you stand out? How do you grab that attention? How do you effectively hold that attention long enough that you can kind of win that trust, and kind of a level of awareness that can ultimately lead to monetizing that attention?
So in between 2 and 3, is it fair to say that there's a point in there somewhere about building trust and authority? Because I found that it's great to get someone's attention, and once you keep it, I feel like in some cases, not all businesses, but if it's not an impulse purchase product, at what point and how much should we focus on as small business owners to try to build trust? Because I've clicked on a lot of great videos and it drives traffic to a website that looks like a fly by night. And I say, I don't care how good their videos are, how many followers they have. I'm probably not going to purchase from that site. So what do you think about that?
Well, there's kind of different ways to look at it. The way that you're talking about it, I would assume, is kind of more related to paid advertising. So
Yeah.
let's start on the flip side of that, of organic social content. So really, kind of what we see, there's a big distinction between organic and paid, and they work well together. But organic is to really earn that trust. It's get people to know, like, and
Good
trust
point.
who you are and what you're about. It's not about making the sale. The direct response and paid route is, once you have that level of awareness, you have that level of trust, then you can move more to kind of that direct response. Now, oftentimes advertisers, like you said, are making that jump, that they haven't kind of built that relationship, so they just go straight to the sale, and it can fall short in terms of the goals and expectations. So with organic, it's, as you said, it's like, how do we get people to know about us, breaking through the noise, they're paying attention to us, like what we're about, and trust us through the information that we're actually delivering. So to give you an example, is we were working with a leather craftsman, a very niche kind of subject matter, a young entrepreneur, multi-generational family, and leather craftsmanship, a very niche subject matter. Had no experience on social media, was really stuck. At the time, I think he had like 2,000 followers on TikTok. So we took him through our viral content model. And what we did is we helped him design a storytelling format called "Is It Worth It?", where he'd buy like a $500 Chanel handbag, deconstruct it on screen, and tell you whether it was worth the money that you were paying for it.
That's cool.
So there's no calls to action in any of his content, just a link in his bio. So what he was doing with that, he was just telling a compelling story, having a strong hook point, sharing his expertise, getting people to know what he is about. And the format became so viral and popular because people, after they see that video, be like, and it was the same reaction that you had, oh, that's interesting, that's cool, I need to go follow this account, I need to see more of
Yeah.
these breakdowns that he's doing. And through that, he jumped from 2,000 followers to he's about to hit 900,000 followers. But the
Dang.
interesting thing is, again, no CTAs in his content, just a link in his bio. And previously, he was spending money on pay-per-click ads, and he was generating about 10,000 visitors a month to his website. Through this, his website traffic jumped up to 100,000 visitors a month. And again,
Wow.
he wasn't like overly selling it. He wasn't using paid advertising. It was purely off of organic, because again, he was getting people to know, like, and trust what he was about. And because they really connected with him, they could see his expertise, they can trust him in terms of the way that he was breaking down whether this handbag, this purse, was worth the money you're paying for. it ultimately led to that next step to say, I want to kind of see what types of products that he has to offer.
That's an awesome story. I really love that. And I believe in that model 100%. You have a blog on your website that talks about selling without selling. And that's one that resonates with me for a lot of reasons. I've told a lot of my clients as a marketing consultant and coach that one of my personal mottos is to add so much value to my followers' newsfeed that as a byproduct, at some point when they have a need, they're going to want to work with me. And just to give you a little background, I don't know that since I've left the agency world that I've ever put a post out that sells my services. An ad maybe occasionally, but as a byproduct, what's happened is people say, well, wow, I've heard you on this podcast. I've seen you do this. I've seen you speaking. I saw your book. And they're like, I've learned so much. Can you tell me a little bit more about this consulting service that you have or X? So can you talk a little bit more about that? And if that's any different from what you just talked about with that story from your client?
It's really in line with that, and I have a similar experience to you where I've published 2 books and I have a third book coming out. In that, like in my books, I don't hold anything back. Like for $10, $20, you get this book, and it has all of this information that we're basically giving to you. We're not holding back on anything, and the idea is to provide as much value as possible, not really hold things back, so that people can kind of see either take that information. And we've had a lot of people reach out and say, I've used the information in your book and I've had incredible success with it. Or other people are just like, the information's great, but I need that additional layer of support. Can you help? So I agree with that wholeheartedly in terms of kind of how can you provide the most value through your content to support the audience that's engaging with it. But again, building that trust and credibility to the point if they do need that help, they can take that next step.
So you've probably given a lot of content already and answers around this question, but when you talk to small businesses, and maybe not even so much mom and pop shops, but small to medium sized businesses, some of them see marketing as a cost center. But what would you say is something that makes good content? What are they doing wrong that, if they were just to change their strategy, they would see more results?
Well, I think that there's a few things I see them doing wrong. First, starting with the content side is even if you're using paid advertising on like a social media platform, you have to realize you're competing against organic content.
Yeah.
And in order to kind of really stand out, grab and hold that attention against all this other content, you need to really tell a compelling story. And I think that a lot of people are relying on like, here's a discount, or here's a product shot, or here's a
Yeah.
shot of my venue, or things of that nature. And people really just don't log on to social media to say, I want to log on to see a great branded piece of content. I want to see a product shot. They're there to be entertained and engaged. So I think really
Yeah.
first and foremost is looking at the content um, that you are putting out into the world, and understanding how is it connecting with the audience. Like to give you an example, like a big part of our model is research. We're constantly doing qualitative analysis of very successful content formats and content creators. And there was a bookstore that we broke down, and I'm blanking on the bookstore's name. It's on TikTok, but a local bookstore, and they designed a really fascinating format where they would go up kind of the man on the street format. They would approach people that worked at the bookstore or customers and say, what is your favorite book of all time? What is the book that excites you the most and that you can't put down? And then the person would run through the bookstore, find the book, hold it up, and explain it. So it was this concept of telling the story behind an individual in a book or a story that they're super passionate about it. You can see it in their facial expression, their tonality. And it was about more connecting with the audience to share a passion of theirs, connecting with the audience. And that bookstore went super viral versus most bookstores would say, hey, come in and you get 50% off your 2 for 1 or something like that, or just a photo of the bookstore, things of that nature. So it's kind of really thinking about like what are the stories behind kind of what you do and what you represent.
That's fascinating because my wife is a big, big reader and probably reads 75 books a year at minimum. And she follows something called Book Talk, which is there's a couple different people who produce a ton of videos around some of these books and that she likes to read. And it kind of viral between her and her friends and a lot of people who are readers, and the circle of women just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's unbelievable the amount of books I've had in my Amazon shopping cart because of her, or I've had to go purchase from Barnes and Noble because of Book Talk. And but I resonate with that because a lot of the things you and I have just talked about, which is you're entertaining, you're adding so much value to your followers newsfeed that as a byproduct they want to see your content, they want to buy from you. And I just think so many people are missing it because, one of my perspectives is I don't log into my email or I don't log into my Facebook account to be sold. I don't want to be sold. In fact, I would argue that whether it's Kohl's or Target or name any other massive retailer, at any point throughout any day, I've got an email promising me 10, 15, maybe even 20% off. So to me, a lot of that's just white noise. I think how you stand out and rise above the noise is by a lot of those wonderful ideas that you've shared. And so I struggle with why businesses struggle with getting in front of the camera or wanting to do things that are outside of the box. And that's one of the things when I'm providing ideas, I just find that sometimes business owners are a little, or marketers are a little, we'll say, suspect to wanting to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is it takes work. It takes time to actually get good at that and do it. Now, the reality of the situation is if you don't spend that time and energy, your business is ultimately going to lose out to competitors or struggle to really scale to that next level. So it just really kind of depends on like how serious are you taking the growth of your business and the future of your business.
Yeah, I've always said that, if you're scared to get in front of the camera, my response is you can't run a business scared, and you can't generate good marketing content scared either. But let's switch gears a little bit. You've got a book that is in my queue. It's coming. I wish I would have ordered this before our conversation today. And it's about 1 million followers, and everyone wants the followers, no doubt. But people struggle to do it. And why is that so hard for people?
Well, it kind of plays into what we just talked about is people want the outcome, but they don't want to do the work to get to the outcome. And anybody listening to this that has any form of success in business, they realize it's a process. Like it takes work and time and dedication to get good at something. And social media is no different. The challenge is people think social media is different because anybody can just whip out a phone, click a button, record something, and post it. But there is a science to it. There is a formula to it. The reality is today there's close to 5 billion people on social media pushing hundreds of billions of messages into the world every day. It's like you're not just there competing against your direct competition, you're competing against Netflix, Kim Kardashian, Kevin Hart, LeBron James, like all these people. And you need to learn how to master becoming a great storyteller. It's not just about how many posts can we do, just clicking record and posting something. It's like understanding like what are the fundamentals of how to tell stories in this medium to grab and hold that attention so that they know, like, and trust you enough to take that next step.
So, speaking of that, tell us the story about how you built a massive following in 30 days.
Yeah, so it wasn't like I woke up one morning and just said, "Oh, I'm going to do this." I spent about 3.5 years kind of developing the core methodology when I was working for journalists, athletes, media companies, and things of that nature. And I spent 3.5 years testing like 100,000 variations of content to kind of really get a foundational understanding of what causes somebody to follow account, what causes somebody to like a post, what causes somebody to click through. So I built this core methodology of understanding content, understanding storytelling that allowed me to kind of do that exercise. And it wasn't a matter of like if I could do it, I knew I could do it. It was the matter of why I was going to do it. And, I had always wanted to do a book, but I knew I needed a strong hook point in order to do it. And the idea just got seeded into my head of this concept of 1 million followers in 30 days, and basically called the literary agent and asked, do you think this is a strong enough hook point? And would you sign me as a client, get me a publishing deal if I did it? And he said yes. And thus the reason behind that. And that book is not just about me and about that experiment. I don't hold anything back about how I did it, but I also went off and interviewed like friends and partners of mine that collectively we've amassed hundreds of millions of followers and billions of views to give a well-rounded perspective of kind of this aspect of storytelling and how you kind of tackle social media at the highest levels.
Though that's amazing. A lot of people say story selling. Do you believe in that?
I think you can do it, definitely, but I think that I don't know the people are saying that. Like I know a few people that are experts at story selling, but they are like geniuses as it comes to it. I think
Yeah.
probably if you're tackling social media and trying to grow, I would probably stay away from the word selling and just focus on storytelling. And once you become a master storyteller, then you can intertwine the selling part of it. Like if you like, the prime example is Mr. Beast. And if nobody has heard of Mr. Beast listening, I recommend checking out his YouTube channel. He's the biggest influencer on the planet. He's probably close to like 300 million subscribers, maybe more across all of his channels. And he focuses on how do I make the best video possible. And if you look at his CTAs, they're very kind of naturally interwoven, and like he's grown to a level where he can't really subsidize his videos just with brand sponsors because they just can't afford to pay it, because his videos on average are doing 100 million plus views. So most
Yeah.
brand advertisers can't kind of afford to pay what it's the worth of that reach and engagement is. In addition to he's spending a few $1 million a video, so he's now built his own brands. He's built Beast Burger and Feastables, and the way that he doesn't like create videos around those products. He's creating the best video possible, and then he's lightly intertwining the CTA of checking out his products, and that's why his products work so well, because he's focused on the audience, connecting with the audience, getting the audience to really trust and like him, and then they're ultimately going to want to take that next step with him. So in terms of that story selling, I'm not going to dilute it, because I know some people that are friends of mine that are masters at that. But for those small businesses or people that haven't really mastered the storytelling part, I would focus more on the storytelling, becoming a master storyteller. And when you do that, it's easy to go back and work in the selling part that feels kind of natural.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is I've always found with digital marketing specifically, you want to meet people where they're at. And as I look at my children, pictures over my left shoulder for those listening, I've got twin daughters that are 8 and a soon to be 16-year-old son. And over the course of time, young kids now spend more time on devices than they do watching TV. And devices could be video games, but more importantly, what are these kids doing? There's a very high probability they're spending the majority of their spare time on YouTube. And uh, at the age of 6, my kids knew who Mr. Beast was. And I remember a time going into Walmart not that long ago and seeing the Mr. Beast chocolates. And at the time, I knew the name. I didn't have a very strong understanding of who he was. And they're like, Mr. Beast. I'm like, how do you know who Mr. Beast is? Like, oh, we see him on YouTube all the time. And I thought he was just for like teenage kids. But he's created so much influence that I would argue his brand and he as an individual is more powerful than any major cable television network from Nickelodeon, Disney, etc. That's hard to fathom for a lot of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, or later. But I think that's what's revolutionizing the world and the game of marketing today is if you can meet people where they're at and do a lot of the things you've been talking about with storytelling, I think you have an advantage over other small brands if we're keeping it small for the moment.
Yeah, and that's that's the thing is people will look at Mr. Beast, and it was interesting because he was offered $1 billion for his YouTube channel. He wouldn't
I
sell
heard
it.
that.
You know, he's probably, especially with Feastables and Beast Burger, he's probably valued at 10 billion, and it's not unfathomable in the next 5 or 10 years he'll be worth 100 billion. But even from a small business perspective, they'd be like, oh, well, I don't need to be Mr. Beast. I agree, you don't, but that doesn't mean you can't learn the principles of
Right.
people that are reaching the highest levels and take those learnings and start applying it into the storytelling that you're doing for your business. And people often get caught so much up in the content. They'll be like, oh, well, Mr. Beast is giving away a Lamborghini. That doesn't relate. It's not about the content, it's about the context of how he's telling his stories. And it doesn't have to be Mr. Beast. It can be other content creators. But I think also a lot of businesses get caught up in comparing themselves to direct competitors. And most
Yeah.
of your direct competitors are not doing well with social media. It's like looking at the larger social ecosystem and understanding, different formats. Like that book format that I broke down, that could be applied to many different types of small businesses. Is kind of looking at the contextual nature of how stories are being told and then leveraging that for your business. Going back to where I started in the film industry, uh, every movie follows the same 3-act structure. It's the structure that scripts are based on and how stories unfold. And that 3-act structure is used no matter the genre. It doesn't matter if it's action, drama, horror, comedy. They use that same 3-act structure to unfold the story. And the same thing goes with social media is there's clear formats that people follow. Now there's hundreds of them across these platforms, but it's really understanding that a format like the book example, that format can be used for different industries. So
For
people
sure.
often get caught up in like a Mr. Beast or looking at the book format, or a photographer friend of mine that does Man on the Street. And they say, oh, he's a photographer. It's a bookstore. It has no relevance to kind of me and my business, when there's complete relevance to it. And there's a lot of um, loss and learning by not looking at content in the world of social media through that lens.
I love to hear that because over the years, I've told people that good social media is good social media. Good storytelling is good storytelling, regardless of the industry. And some people will look at me and they kind of scratch their head saying, well, how could that be if I'm a salon and that's a restaurant? It's like, well, good, powerful content that tells stories is good, regardless of the industry. Obviously, that's a deeper conversation, but I love to hear that from someone else. I want to switch gears again because as I was on your LinkedIn the other day, you had a video story about a TikToker who went viral over a long period of time. And you talk about the power of the however moment. And that's something I want to learn more about.
Yeah, the however moment is, it plays into it's kind of one of the core elements that a lot of the top YouTubers follow, is the Jenga effect, which is, if you ever played the game Jenga, it's the
Hmm.
tower of blocks on a table. And what happens when you play Jenga is each person goes around the table and is pulling out a block from that tower. And what happens is, as you're pulling out that block, it's building tension. Is the tower going to fall? Is the tower going to fall? And then when it comes out and it doesn't fall, it releases that tension and then it builds again. So the however effect plays into that, is how do you kind of unfold the story in a way that builds tension, releases tension, that keeps going and going and going and going, so that it doesn't feel kind of monotone and flat. So it's, you really kind of want to look at that story of, how do I keep unfolding it in an interesting way so it kind of compounds itself. So um like Mark Rober is one of the bigger YouTuber guys. He's a former NASA engineer, and he kind of, one of his top videos was trying to make a pool out of Jello, like putting a pool full of Jello, and the hook going into it. But
Yeah.
as the story unfolds, he's kind of he is revealing kind of the difficulties of doing it. It's like, okay, we've mastered this. However, now we've got to figure out how to master this. And then you master that. However, I got to figure out how to master that. Versus if in the first 5 seconds, he's like, oh, yeah, I created a pool out of Jello and here it is. It's not building retention. It's not holding that that attention long enough to trigger the algorithms to send it to a lot of people, and thus the story can fall flat. So it's looking for these inflections in terms of unfolding the story. And it's the same thing in movies. Is like if you watch Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible, they don't beat the bad guys in the first 5 minutes. Is like
No.
the story is set up, and then the story is unfolding of all these challenges and obstacles that they're trying to overcome in order to reach the end goal of beating the bad guy and securing whatever they need to secure.
Yeah, that's almost a bit of a light bulb moment for me as I listen to you tell that story because my kids follow these, I'll call them C-level Mr. Beast influencers on YouTube. And there was a recent video up the other day while they were home from school or summer camp, and they were trying to break open a briefcase stuffed with $1 million in cash. It's like transparent. And they used all these different construction equipment. It started from a hammer, started with fire, and then everything got bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, my kids are watching this for like 90 minutes. And I'm like, just fast forward to the end to see the outcome. But they like, oh, we're going to try this and we're going to try that. Well, we got to get it done before dark. And it kept their attention. Now, granted, these are children, but that's exactly what all of these videos that they watch are about. And there are some great YouTubers making a lot of money with a ton of followers that are ascending to that Mr. Beast level. And that is interesting because it doesn't sound that difficult to do. Now, granted, you don't need a 60-minute video, right? But can you do this in a 2-minute or 3-minute video?
Absolutely, you can do it in 60 seconds. Like, to give you another example, is I mentioned a friend of mine. His name's Alex Stemp. He's about 20 million followers on TikTok, and he's a professional photographer. And he does the man on the street format, where he approaches random strangers on the street and offers them professional photo shoots. Now, what he does is he doesn't do the reveal of the photo until the end. So he'll kind of approach all different types of people. Like I think his most viewed video is approaching on Hollywood Boulevard a guy dressed in Joker. So he kind of sets the stage. I'm going to do a photo shoot of this, but he doesn't reveal kind of the end photo until the end. And sometimes he makes people watch a part 2 to get that reveal. And it was interesting because he, a lot of people in the comments were saying, do the reveal in the beginning. I want to see in the beginning. And he tested it, and the performance just completely dropped because it's letting the story unfold, and that like, oh, he's engaging with this interesting character, but I want to see what the outcome is. I want to see how cool or interesting these photos look. Like he did like a bodybuilder on Venice Boulevard that was like, it's not like glitter, but there's like colored powder that he would like clap his hands and it would kind of blow up in front of him, and it kind of sparks in your head. Well, that seems interesting. I wonder what the actual photo is going to look like. And those videos are like less than 60 seconds. So you can definitely use these tactics in any length of video to really carry the story till the end.
I love that. And I think that's practical advice that a lot of marketers and small businesses can use. But more specifically with these video platforms, we talk about vertical video. So for those listening, could be TikTok, could be Reels, could be Snapchat, could be almost anything. But when it comes to vertical video, I've found, and I know this really varies from different industries and different accounts, but what is that sweet spot for length? Because I've found that the 60-second videos do not perform as well as some of the 20-second videos.
The sweet spot for length is however long it takes you to tell a story. So if it takes you 60 seconds, 60 seconds. If it takes 20 seconds, I would say my hypothesis is the longer the video is, the more you have to be a nuanced storyteller to hold that attention.
Sure.
So potentially what's happening is in the 20-second videos is the story is unfolding quicker and kind of delivering in the outcome, versus the longer ones, maybe there's a missing nuance in there. But I never would say that the length of video dictates the success, because like you could point to 1 million videos that are 20 seconds long that underperform. You can point to 1 million videos that are 2 minutes long that perform. So it's not about the length. It's about the contextual nature of how you're telling these stories and these nuances.
I love that answer because I've often told people, and I truly believe this, that there is no silver bullet. So looking for tricks to beat the algorithm isn't really possible so much. And I think if you focus on quality, which obviously, as you've said many times over, is storytelling, and you have that hook point, I think you're going to grow over time. You'll see gradual success. And in the story of that TikToker and some of the other businesses that you've worked with, that takes years to get. And I think that's probably one of the many things missing for so many people trying this, especially with the video, is patience. This takes time to build an audience and build trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it can happen quickly as well once you kind of master these nuances. Like the leather craftsman we worked with, really took off, I think, in like month 3 or 4. Um and start compounding audience and views and things. It's really about understanding, like, what is the format. And this is a big mistake that people make, is that they don't look at the world of social media through a format lens. And if you look at the top content creators, is they have one kind of format in terms of how they tell their story, like man on the street. My friend Alex, that approaches random strangers in the street, offers a professional photo shoot. That is a format. Another man on the street is the bookstore one that I revealed, or like Veritasium on YouTube is an explainer video format. Is like understanding the format that you're going after, sticking with that format, and mastering the nuances of executing on that. Most people are either not looking at it through a lens of format and they're just kind of like blindly creating content, think they're telling stories, or they're getting caught up in chasing trends and just trying to kind of
Hmm.
chase the next trend or something. Like, I can't stand seeing these videos on Instagram. Is like, if you use this song,
Yeah,
you're gonna go viral. And
no
it's
silver
like,
bullet.
if you look at 99% of people who use that song, they're not going viral. Sure,
Hmm.
maybe some people are, but it's not because they're using the song, it's because the other elements in the video. So that's the real kind of key thing. And that's where we focus most of our time and energy. Is we, as a team, we research these formats and we spend about a day or two actually dissecting them. And kind of what we do is we look at the high performers using that format, but then we look at the average performers and the underperformers. And what we're seeing is what's happening in those high performers that's not happening in the average or the underperformers. So we have over like 100 different performance drivers that we have in our library, anything from like pacing, tonality, facial expressions, number of edits, first 3 seconds, captions, title cards, all of these elements. And typically when we break down a format, we're looking at between 3 to 5 core performance drivers that we identify that are happening in the gold, that are not happening in the silver and bronze ones, the average and the underperformers. That gives us an idea of, if we are going to go after this format, these are the things that contribute the successful use of it, but these are also the things that contribute to it not successfully being executed. Because people will fall into a trap and see a piece of content or a content creator and be like, oh, they're having so much success, I'm just going to do what they're doing, without really understanding what they're doing. And that's what we'll look even within um, a popular account, is not just looking at their high performance, because not every video takes off, outside of kind of like Mr. Beast, who spent years kind of mastering this. But looking at within a creator or a channel using this format, looking at the highest performers, the average, and the low performers with it, with that control of the same creator, the same format, and really diving into these qualitative elements, not the content, but the context of how they're expressing their message through this format, to understand what really drives it.
Context and qualitative. A couple key takeaways there. I love that. Another blog post you had on your website, Brennan, was a story about Dr. Erin Nance and her social media success. How she went from 600 to 18 million views. I want to hear more about this story because I think that's one that a lot of people are struggling with right now. Not something we can all achieve, but I want to hear this story.
Well, she would kind of kick me if I didn't say, I think she's well over 50 million views
Wow.
at this point, probably even close to 75 million. But she's done extremely well. I mean, she created a channel from scratch on TikTok called Little Misdiagnosed, and it went from like zero to 200,000 followers in 4 weeks. I think she's over 300,000, and I think she's negotiating a book deal and potentially a reality TV show. But again, it was somebody obviously very accomplished. She was a top, or she is a top hand doctor in the world, and didn't really understand social media. And we kind of looked at the lens of how can we tell effective stories based upon kind of her experience, because just talking about hands, it's kind of very niche and not very interesting.
Yeah.
So she started to really get into emotional stories about her journey as a doctor, like patients that came in that were struggling with specific illnesses, like the most difficult patient that she ever had to deal with, the biggest illnesses, misdiagnosis. And it was just her speaking on her iPhone to the camera, but it was through the stories that she was telling that audiences really connected with in a meaningful way that allowed her to truly break through to that next level.
That's incredible. I've seen a lot of other accounts do something like that. I shouldn't say a lot, a fair amount. And it's different things that maybe in my case range to from men's health to self-care and things like that, mental health. And when something speaks to you, maybe I'll click follow after I see a couple of good videos. And there's been instances where I've gone to Amazon and I've bought supplements or vitamins based on that video because I believed in so much what they had to say, and they continue to add value to my newsfeed. But before we wrap up, Brendan, I want to ask one last question. And in your bio, it says you've worked with T Swift and Rihanna. I want to ask a little bit more about how some of these amazing opportunities came about for you and what it was like working with them.
Yeah, so they came about because when I created that influencer technology platform, I licensed it to MTV and Viacom. And when we found out that it was too early, I created a different technology platform that really played into a strategic initiative that MTV and Viacom had, which was supporting the artists that were building on their platform. And through that, they started making introductions to those teams and individuals through kind of the technology to support them in their growth. Um, so a lot of it, Rihanna specifically, we didn't work with her directly. It was through Rock Nation and her team. Taylor, I had a few meetings directly with her. A lot of the work was done through the team, and I think that the challenging part oftentimes I think comes in when they have such large teams and they need those teams because they become such big operations. But like Taylor Swift is one of the smartest social media minds on the planet. I worked with her probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. So she was on that kind of an inflection point um, of becoming a global superstar, but definitely not where she's at today. And she, one of the smartest things that she said that I learned from her is she understood that social media was not a one to many platform; it's a one to one platform. So if you think about it, when you're consuming social media, you're sitting on the couch or on the bus or in the bed. It's you're not sitting in a stadium full of people watching it together. And she understood and mastered that connection of how do I connect with this individual, making it feel like I'm connecting with this individual versus I'm speaking to millions of people. And that's where a lot of people kind of fall short with social media, saying, "Hey, everybody," starting out that way. And it's like, well, who's everybody? I don't see everybody around me. It's just me, the individual.
I love that thought of one to one versus one to many. I've heard many people say that, but the more you say and talk about what she had to say, it makes so much sense because she is a tremendous storyteller and she does a great job both on stage and through social media of telling stories and deeply connecting with her audience. And I think, not only being a great musician like Rihanna, they're visible, they're active, they're out there, and they're posting, they're communicating, they're storytelling. And that may be something that, even some of the other great musicians today are not doing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with it. I mean, you can point to examples of other people that kind of break through to that level that don't have to do that because their music just carries itself. But there is a reason that Taylor is the biggest kind of musician or talent on the planet today. Yes, she's very talented, but as you said, like on stage or in social media or in person, like she shows you that she really deeply cares. And like,
Yeah.
for example, is like some of the things that went super viral for her was she shows up for a fan's baby shower or a birthday or on the doorstep with Christmas gifts. And it's not, if you watch it, because we did a pretty deep analysis of the concept of giving things away. It was when she did it, and when you look at the most successful people doing it, it's not, hey, look at me and look at what I'm doing. It's, hey, I really care about this person. And with Taylor's instance, it's not just I care about this fan, I care about all of my fans. And here is a way that I'm showing that you mean a tremendous amount to me through this interaction. So even though the 10 million people watching her show up on a fan's doorstep with a Christmas gift, she's not showing up on each one of those doorsteps with those 10 million fans. That fan that's watching on YouTube or Instagram can kind of feel like, oh, Taylor does care about me. Taylor does care about my fans. And that's a subtle nuance. And, Taylor, it works for Taylor really well because it is for real. It's not an act. Some other people can kind of get away with it from an act perspective and make it seem like it cares. But when you kind of look at that kind of connection point that she has, that's what's really allowed her to break all these records with her tour and just reach the highest levels that really haven't been seen since like the age of Michael Jackson. And if you think back to Michael Jackson, it's like there was far fewer musicians that he was competing against
Yeah.
versus today in the age of social media. So um, it's all credit to kind of her genius and kind of understanding that's allowed her to take that leap to the highest levels of stardom.
Well said. I think she's got a couple of things that she does with her concerts that are different. I mean, obviously she's very creative, both online and in concert and show, but very experiential and very immersive. I haven't been to one of her shows, but I've seen videos, and she's not just up there singing songs with a nice video board in the background. She has one of the most experiential concerts that, I mean, it's akin to what Michael Jackson was doing back in the 80s and 90s. And she's different. She's different in a sea of sameness, which there are a lot of great artists in different genres, but she is definitely stepping outside the box, which is something that a lot of businesses just struggle to do so often, I think.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact age. I'm pretty sure when I first met her, she was like 16, 15, and you could see it then. I mean, you
I
could
bet.
see she was so wicked smart, so on top of it. It wasn't like somebody else was pulling the strings and kind of making it happen. Obviously her father, a very astute business person, was kind of helping her along in terms of business thing, but as it pertained to fan and audience engagement, connecting with fans, the music, like she got it. Like she was wicked smart, even at a very early age.
I believe it. Well, Brendan, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. But before I let you go, can you tell the audience a little bit more about where they can find you, any products or services that you have going on, as well as where they can find your books?
Yeah, if they want to kind of reach out and see if we're the right fit to work together, we work on in-depth social media strategy and training. They can just go to hookpoint.com. Our books are sold anywhere, Amazon, Audible. You can, if you want the 1 million followers book, you can go to book.1millionfollowers.com as well.
This was a treat. A lot of great takeaways for the audience today. For those of you listening, thank you so much for your ears and for the time today. We appreciate you. Until next time, peace.